Welcome to my budget deck channel where I try to make decks as cheap and playable as possible. So if this is something you'd be interested in, then why not subscribe? Today I've had a look at the new set, the new cards, and what I did was I didn't instantly go to Sprite. No, I revisited an old deck and gave it basically a complete overhaul. It's a tiny bit more expensive, a different expensive this time, and I will talk about what I decided to play, why I decided to play it, and what technically you might not want to be playing, and why I decided to, certain cards were better, certain cards were a bit worse. Ash Blossom, definitely a card you still want to be playing. You want to be playing like Infinite Impermanence, Ash Blossom, all of these cards because they do stuff on your opponent's turn. If you have Max C, play this card as well. You can cut out stuff like Lost Wind, that's totally fine. You can cut out stuff like Forbidden Chalice for good hand traps, and that's basically what the deck is. The deck by itself tries to go into certain rank 4s. Mainly these days it tries to get into Exosister Martha, which is a card that locks you into Exosisters, not just for the rest of this turn, but for the whole turn. So it's very hard to combine anything with this deck that doesn't take up the normal summon. But good news, everyone, there's a cheap card that is not Goblinberg, this annoying card, but it's Tin Goldfish, and Tin Goldfish actually does stuff on normal summon, still gets you into rank 4, and then with the rank 4 you can actually go into Kaspitell, and Kaspitell then searches you one Exosister monster from your hand, from your deck to your hand, and that will be Martha most of the time, and that is fine. Then if you had Goblinberg, you'd technically play this as well, but then you might as well just max out on the Marthas and the Paxes, and you know how it is. If you want to keep the deck cheap, you have to make certain adjustments, and this is definitely one of them. I still run one Jigabyte because they are all spellcasters, and sometimes you will not be able to go into Martha. If you summon this card, sadly, then Martha doesn't work, but you can see in your hand, if you have this card left over, then I guess just not use it. You will be stuck with some leftover Exosisters eventually at one point anyway, so adding one more into the mix doesn't really matter, but sometimes you just want to go into a rank 4 and go on from there, because then you can still search stuff like Elis, or you can still search, go into things like Mikailis, and then search a spell trap, and you can continue to do certain things. So I felt like one level 4 extender still made sense, but if you really are against this, then you can cut this, you could play another Sophia, you can do whatever you want. Goblinberg comes to mind. If you have it, then this works as well. There are so many cards. Technically you could play double summon if you like. It's kind of the same as Jigabyte but different, so that works as well, but you don't run that many monsters, so I felt like normal summon would probably not end up well, because you would need normal summon, double summon, and then 2 other level 4 monsters in hand, and usually you don't want to have this. Elis very nice. You can always special summon the gal, so that's a massive plus. We already talked about the effects in the first set in my first review, so I'll just be skipping over that and mainly describe which card is important and why I do run it. Stella, very good card because it is technically like a Goblinberg Tin Goldfish kind of card, so it gets you one Exosister from your hand out of the field, and you do play quite a few. You have ways to search them. If you feel like you don't have enough, then you could actually bump up the Sophias and take out Vadis if you really want to keep it cheaper. If not, you can just bump it up and cut the Jigabyte, for example, and see how that goes. I felt like the ratios were fine, but obviously there will be hands where you can't be doing all that much. But yeah, this is quite the important card because it actually gets you into a rank 4. Irene can be nice. It does draw you cards, so it's not too bad, and you can get one Exosister card back into the deck because you have lots of cards, and technically it's a bit worse than actually just having a draw, but it still does stuff. It still gets rid of one card that you won't be using this turn to get you into a card that you might be using this turn, and you have quite a few of those, so if the effect isn't too bad, I wish it could special summon itself, but we already have that effect on a different card. Sophia, technically a very good card, but since it cannot special summon itself, and you will have searchers and stuff, I feel like 2 was fine for the fact that it was a super rare. You get away with it, you don't have to run 3, but the draw is obviously quite nice, and the LP gain, life point gain, is not necessary at all. But yeah, this card, very, very nice if you can get it off, but it's not necessary in this specific variant. We have Martha, the big star of the game, of the deck. It's, well, the card does nearly everything you want it to do. It doesn't take up your normal summon. It summons a card from your deck, well, summons Elis from your deck, which this card is paired up with 2 now, a bit strange, but it is what it is. And Yeah, then it locks you though, which can be quite problematic. You can still use the effect that every one of the Exosister have. If your opponent moves something in their graveyard, then you can Exi summon and stuff, but this card instantly goes into rank 4, and then you can search stuff. And what you kind of want to be ending on is this massive Bungus boss monster, which should not be too hard most of the time. Like, there's routes and things that you can be doing. If you search Pax, for example, there's stuff that can happen and so on. There's loads of things that this card can help you with. Paw of Prosperity, very good card in the stick because consistency is an issue, especially if you play it like this. Then you want to be seeing good cards, and Prosperity makes it possible, especially because your extra deck is on the cheap side, so it's on the bad side most of the time. Double Dimensional Fissure just in here, didn't want to run 3 because it can get a bit bricky and you want to be doing as much as possible, so that's why it's at 2. There's obviously hand traps that you can be using instead of this as well. Dimensional Shifter comes to mind, also a card you could be using. It seems a bit counterproductive because you technically want your opponent to do stuff in the graveyard, but there's still things that they can be moving in the graveyard then. Spell trap effects that banish itself, for example, and Dimensional Fissure is just like so good at the moment because it shuts down so much stuff. You're playing against Sprite a lot probably these days, and if you go first against them, they cannot do the frog combos with this, and there's lots that this card shuts down. So I would definitely say right now it is at least a 2-off. You can play it at 3, but it can be swapped out for other kind of shenanigans. Then we have one Carpedivem. This card technically isn't too good, but it can stop your opponent from using certain things if you special summon during your opponent's turn, which you can quite easily actually. You can quite easily Exi summon with the new cards with Arment now, with Returnia. Well, Arment isn't new, but Returnia is. And there's so many ways that you could do this, could pull this effect off, so it's not bad. And this card is actually very, very nice against Runic. You could decide to run it at 2 if you feel like you need it even more often, because every time Exosister monster attacks once per turn, then you can target one spell trap card your opponent controls and destroy it, which is an effect that can come in very, very handy if your opponent decides to play a very floodgatey kind of deck. And that's why I like this card at 1, because it is searchable. Forbidden Chalice, good going first, good going second, does a lot of stuff. Pax at 2 because we want to try and keep it cheap. The ratio that I tried out first was triple Pax and 1 Martha, but I kind of like being able to search another Martha out of my deck. Also, if you only play 1 and you do play against Runic, there's a big chance that they might banish it and then you can't search it at all. So I felt like this was the better ratio. You could even go one further and play 3 and 1 Pax, but I felt like it was a bit more balanced this way. It's totally up to you what you have in the end with this card. Mainly you will be searching Martha anyway, but there are occasions where you want to be searching a spell trap if you already opened with 1 Martha, so I felt like this is the ratio that would make sense, but that is totally up to you. Arment, nice card, can do stuff during your opponent's turn, unless they have a monster special summon from the graveyard, then you can use it during your turn as well. It's a bit annoying, you could cut it down to 2 if you like. You don't need to run it at 3 because sometimes it can be bricky, it is searchable. It's a neat card, it triggers lots of stuff, it does certain things. Another card that got suggested, and it's not terrible, the problem is it's a win effect, otherwise it would have been a bit better, but it's Dimension Slice. You could run this at 1 at least. When a monster is special summoned to your side of the field, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls and banish that target. It's okay, gets rid of certain stuff that your opponent has. You have lots of tools to special summon monsters during your opponent's turn. The only problem is a bit the win effect, so if you use stuff like Vadis and things, then that can be iffy if you chain it to stuff, because you obviously can't chain things then. Same with Arment, but sometimes it works. If you feel like it doesn't work at all, then replace it with another good stuff card. Lost Wind, very nice. It's not bad. If you discard it by Magic Jammer as well, then it keeps coming back. Magic Jammer, by the way, a card I run because Runic is quite big. Sprite has some spells that are annoying. Branded is very annoying on spells, and back row removal is very annoying. So Magic Jammer does quite a lot of stuff, and you will have some Exosister cards in your hand that you might not be using during your opponent's turn, and then it's better to stop your opponent's blowout cards and lose 1 card in your hand than actually just straight up lose the game. But obviously, again, if you want to be playing different stuff, you can. It's kind of the same reason why Solemn Judgment is in here. Also kind of a free card that you get, and it stops your opponent's overpowered spell traps. Vadis, a card that I've included this time, still not 100% sure, because the thing is you could usually like use it in combination with Cult by the Grave if your opponent uses that, but you don't play any hand traps really, so your opponent doesn't really have a reason to use Cult by the Grave against you. So there's that in the first place. With Sprite being around and Despia being a thing, Branded being a thing, this card will be able to do more stuff, so I would run it at 1. It can come in handy, it can shut down your opponent quite a bit, so this time this card is actually included, and we run 1 Returnia because this card actually does a lot of stuff. It does a lot of stuff. It can technically banish 2 cards, and it could be used to Exis summon during your opponent's turn, so this card does very, very much for Exosisters. And for the extra deck, just some level 4 stuff. Obviously Zeus, if you have it, play it, because you have multiple ways of direct attacking with rank 4s and lots of other stuff. You could play Utopia double, but I decided to go away from that package because it didn't feel necessary now that you have Magnifica, which can attack twice, and that felt good as well. You want to be playing at least 2 Mikailis, but for budget reasons there's only 1, so if you have to play it, if you only have 1 is fine. Triple Kaspitell at this point, because I do like the fact that you can keep on searching monsters from your deck. 2 usually is fine, but I felt like since I don't have anything else that's good, 3 also made sense. Geo Nature Transfer, so obviously forgot this card. Sorry, but yeah, a card that you could consider as well. 1 Gibrine, because this card is still like disruption during your opponent's turn, so that's quite nice. Asophiel, good for bouncing stuff, good for shutting down certain things, so it's not terrible. And this card very, very strong, like actually very, very strong. Beautiful artwork, it does so much for the deck. And budget hero Decode Talker for certain reasons. Very important card, Called by the Grave if you have it, because your opponent can easily shut down Martha, and that would be annoying, so something to consider. And otherwise there's lots of stuff you can play in this deck to accompany the Exosisters, lots of stuff that you would want to be playing. Sadly, Prosperity is at 1, so that's a bit iffy, that's a bit annoying, but we have to make do with what we have. So this is the list. I hope you enjoyed the deck profile. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I hope you have a nice day.